What is going on, everybody? Welcome back to the Cosmic Wonder. We know that Avengers Doomsday is going to involve the multiverse, and we know that there are going to be variants of characters that we've known and love return in Avengers Doomsday and in Avengers Secret Wars. Robert Downey Jr. is returning as Dr. Doom, and about 6 months ago, Deadline reported that Chris Evans is going to be returning to Marvel for Avengers Doomsday to work with the Russo brothers. And now it looks like we found out that Chris Evans has secretly already filmed scenes for Avengers Doomsday. But Marvel Studios was using a code name for his character, so nobody found out that it was actually him. That code name was Luke Cage. Now, we've heard this before, that they were filming scenes with the character under the code name Luke Cage. And while some people thought that maybe Luke Cage could be in a scene in Avengers Doomsday, sorry to disappoint, but we never really believed that Luke Cage would just be brought in out of nowhere and be introduced in Avengers Doomsday. So we figured it was some type of a code name, and as it turns out, it looks like Chris Evans has indeed filmed some scenes for Avengers Doomsday. The only question is he going to be good or is he going to be bad? When Deadline reported this back in December, they reported Chris Evans is coming back to the Marvel Cinematic Universe for the Joe and Anthony Russo directed Avengers Doomsday. At this point in time, the role isn't entirely clear, but sources say Anthony Mackie's Sam Wilson character will also return as Captain America. Evans in the Captain America costume seems less likely. However, it wouldn't be a shock if he reprises Steve Rogers. So the big question right now is, with his return, will he be good or will he be bad? It could honestly go either way based on everything that we've heard, but based on the leaked set photo of the house that they were filming at for Chris Evans' role, it might point to him being good. However, there's also a pretty big argument to be made that he could be coming back as a Captain Hydra and he could be bad and a part of Doom's team. But let's first take a look at what we know so far about him possibly returning to be a good Steve Rogers. Well, like I mentioned, Deadline reported his return, and they also reported the return of Haley Atwell as Peggy Carter. And this is important to know because the set photo that we got was of a house, and the set name for this set piece was titled Luke Cage House 1960s. This was revealed to us by Unbox PhD, an account that has been getting a lot of set photos and videos lately of the Avengers Doomsday set. And if you take a look, it seems like a pretty simple house. To me, it doesn't strike me as a Captain Hydra type of feel, but to me, it looks more like a house that perhaps Steve and Peggy could have settled down at. And if this is taking place in the 1960s, then Steve and Peggy should be around 40 years old. So just about a prime time age for the two of them to be recruited for some big multiversal task. And there are two options which they could go, which makes sense. And we've already talked about it. It could be Doom recruiting them, or it could be somebody good recruiting them, like somebody from the TVA, or Sylvie perhaps. If you caught our video yesterday, we had a report that Sylvie is essentially going to lead kind of a multiversal Avengers team to fight against Doom. Well, Chris Evans' Steve Rogers could definitely be a part of that team. In fact, in that report, it does say that Captain Carter is going to be a part of that team. Now, her role remains to be a mystery because based on what we saw at the end of What If, we don't know if they're going to bring this super powerful version of Peggy Carter into the multiverse or if they're going to stick to a version where Steve Rogers went back in time and was able to live out his life with Peggy Carter, and the two of them simply get recruited as good guys because they've done a lot of good in the past, or if Steve and Peggy are going to be completely different variants than we've seen before. And the two of them also don't even have to be together. This could simply be Steve Rogers' house in a universe where him and Peggy never got together. A lot of unknowns here, but I would like to think that the two of them would still be together in whatever universe this is. Maybe it is the main 616 universe, but it's back in time when Steve went back, which you could argue created a branch timeline. It could be something totally different, but I think you get my point. A universe where they are together. But here's the issue about being recruited by people. Sylvie could show up with the TVA with some really cool technology and explain what's happening. She could explain to Steve and possibly Peggy that they need them to come, they need them to save the universe, nay, the multiverse, once again. And they could very well go along with that. But Dr. Doom could show up and also say the same thing. Because according to previous reports from insiders, Dr. Doom is going to believe that he is the hero trying to save the multiverse in Avengers Doomsday. And of course, we have heard that he is going to have his own team as well, and some of those characters are indeed going to be some Avengers. So he could show up in the 1960s to Steve Rogers and possibly Peggy Carter as well, and basically say the same thing that Sylvie in the TVA would say. The multiverse is going to be destroyed. I need your help to save it. And here's the thing. At the time, Dr. Doom probably does believe that he is going about trying to save the multiverse the right way. And if you think about who's kind of holding everything together right now, it's Loki, somebody that Steve Rogers knows to be evil. So if Doom shows up and says, hey, the multiverse is in jeopardy right now, the entire multiverse, and it's all because of Loki. And the TVA, which Loki controls that exists outside of space and time, they are a giant threat to the multiverse, and we have to go take them out or the entire multiverse is going to be destroyed. Well, if this is indeed the same Steve Rogers that we've known from the main 616 timeline and they're simply going back in time to get him, or even if it's a variant that experienced a very similar life to the main 616 Steve Rogers, he's probably going to want to get back into action to save the entire multiverse and to take down Loki once again. Because it doesn't really seem like at any point in time in the Infinity Saga, Thor would have had the time to tell everybody what had happened to Loki. Thor was away from Earth for a pretty long time, and then in Thor Ragnarok is where Loki kind of became good, but right away we go into Avengers Infinity War where Loki dies. Also, Thor doesn't arrive on Earth until the very end of Avengers Infinity War, and that's when the Avengers lose, but pretty much right away they go to kill Thanos in Avengers Endgame, in which they succeed, but realize that the damage is done and they can't really reverse it. Then Thor goes away to what is deemed New Asgard now on Earth, so it just doesn't really seem like Thor caught them up with everything Loki did. Plus, Loki only just redeemed himself at the end of Ragnarok and the beginning of Infinity War, so it's not exactly like he's the same Loki that we see in Loki season 1 and season 2. It's completely different. So it wouldn't really be that hard for a Dr. Doom to show up, present himself as the savior of the multiverse, or at least the person who's trying, and say, I need your help to fight against Loki. And Steve Rogers says, all right, I gotta do this again. I can do this all day. And remember, he is a super soldier, so even if it's in the 1960s, he hasn't really aged. And keep in mind, he's already returned to Marvel before in Deadpool and Wolverine. Not as Captain America, but the Human Torch in a pretty epic scene. So these are basically our two main options. However, there is a third option, which I actually think is the more likely one. This option is he does originally work with Dr. Doom. Doom shows up, says, hey, we got to save the multiverse and fight Loki. Steve Rogers says, okay. But eventually we do get to a part where Doom has to fight the Avengers, and Sam Wilson is going to be on that team with some other people, of course, that he knows as well. And this is where they can convince him that Doom is actually in the wrong. They're trying to stop Doom because Loki is actually good, and this is the only way to save the multiverse. I'm sure they'll still fight at first, but ultimately I think someone like Sam Wilson could convince Steve Rogers that Doom really is the bad guy and they're the good guys. Through the power of friendship, Steve Rogers could realize that Doom is bad and join the other Avengers, which I think would be really cool. And I'm not sure if Marvel Studios really wants to throw him into a Captain Hydra role. But then again, Robert Downey Jr. is back as the main villain, Dr. Doom, so you never know. But I will point out that the Captain Hydra rumor is just a rumor. There really isn't any type of backing behind this. Even the reports that we've heard have basically said that he could be working on Dr. Doom's team. They didn't specifically say he could be Captain Hydra, but a lot of people have speculated that if he is going to be a part of Doom's team, perhaps it is an evil version of Steve Rogers, which would be Captain Hydra. So that's where those reports are coming from. But since Dr. Doom is already going to be bad, it actually would kind of be cool to see a good Steve Rogers go up against somebody who looks exactly like Tony Stark, who was a great friend of his. There really is a lot that they could do with Avengers Doomsday, but the fact that they're bringing Robert Downey Jr. back as the villain and now Chris Evans is returning and shooting secret scenes, it's just a really exciting time right now. And I know I'm jumping the gun a little bit, but I can't wait till we get to Secret Wars because you know that's going to be crazy. But in the meantime, let me know how excited you are for Avengers Doomsday in the comments down below. And let me know who you think Chris Evans is going to be returning as in Avengers Doomsday. Don't forget to like this video and subscribe so you don't miss out on any of the latest Marvel news, rumors, or leaks. You can also find me on TikTok, Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, and Snapchat. And as always, thank you all so much for watching. Woof woof.